We are going to go through the survey that was distributed in late December and ran through about the middle of January. It was talking about would we want a community center? If so, what types of functions could that serve? And what type of functions would you want the city to help with overall? And then how that would be funded. So I went through the results of the survey and picked some selected questions that I thought were most relevant, and then graphed their responses out. So let me share those with you briefly. And we're going to go to the first set of questions, the first question, which was, what kind of activities would you like to see in your community? There were 757 respondents to that question, and there was a significant percentage, about 25%, that said, we do not want you to provide any more activities or services to us that cost money. Another, let's see, what is this number? It's almost 3%, 2.8% said that they would be okay with us having a community center or whatever, as long as tax money wasn't used or your taxes were raised to cover the cost. A large percentage of people, the second largest at 28.3%, said that they wanted to see more outdoor related activities. That could be parks, that could be trails, that could have been an outdoor amphitheater, or things like that. About 16% said they would like to see the city provide a rec center akin to what AF or Lehigh or Provo have. Of course, I would imagine that most people would want a Provo-style rec center as opposed to an AF-style rec center. We'll talk about rec centers in a minute. The biggest percentage, about 30%, 29.5%, said that they wanted either a performing arts center or a place where you could have events, art shows, classes. It was an arts-related response. And so there was quite a bit of interest in that, relatively speaking. An improved library was pretty small. I think that was just, 1.5%. And then there were quite a few people that said, 2% people that said they'd like to see a farmer's market or something like that. Restaurants were mentioned, as well as people that were interested in moving to Sunday openings so that we could have more businesses, but that was super small. It was just a few people that brought that up. So that was the first question. A follow-up question from the survey was, what kind of spaces do you think are lacking in Highland? And there were 825 responses. And this I broke into a little bit more detail. There was the no group that said, we don't want you doing anything more than you're currently doing. They just didn't want the city to do that, and they didn't feel it was the role of government. There are points to be made there. Another set of people, a little bit larger set of people, said we would be interested in additional outdoor activities, parks, trails, pavilions, that kind of things. Rec center was almost 32% of people said we want a rec center explicitly. And I categorize people that ask for a pool as asking for a rec center. A community center by name was mentioned a few times. That was 5-ish%, a little over 10% wanted a community theater. Another set of people talked about arts. Another little bit broader set of people, still under the 5% range, wanted a library. Restaurants were brought up again, marketplaces. Sunday was mentioned again uh, by a few people. And then people talked about, we want more businesses in Highland. Now, recognize that there are people that have opposing points of view on all of these things. But it was interesting to see what was the residents are most interested in. Um, a couple of things that I think are more important are, here's a question that says, Highland City presently supports your needs for a community space. And about 780 people replied to that. When they replied, they were given a scale to select, and on the far right was absolutely positively yes. It meets all my needs, and on the right side was no, absolutely does not. So a composite score for that question was 47.4, which means it leaned yes, that the city is providing what we need. Um, More so than not. There were, it was interesting, the response, would you like to see a new community center in Highland? And in that case, the score was 62%, and that meant it leaned no. Would you support the city increasing taxes to construct and maintain a community center? It leaned more no. 73 is the rough score there. Would you support the city raising funding through donations for a new community center? And that leaned no. That seems kind of surprising, except that I would guess that residents are thinking, well, if we build a new community center, and even if it's built using donations, there are still operating costs that go along with that we're going to be obligated to maintain. And so we would prefer that you don't raise money for something that we don't want to pay for on a maintenance basis. So at first I was surprised that it leaned no, because I would think, well, that's, if people want to raise money, why would you be opposed to that? The next question that I evaluated was, would you be interested in making a personal in-kind gift or donation for a new space? And that leaned no, 75%. The 25% that would be in the kind of leaning yes would correlates pretty well with the last question we asked, which was, would you want more information on what's coming or what could come or how you could help make it happen? And so that's still a good number, I think, of people that would be interested in donating personally to make something happen that they're interested in supporting. And then so that covers it all. It's definitely a no that people that are residents don't want to pay more taxes to construct and maintain a new community center. And given that they asked for a rec center, that I would think that would apply to that. Now let's talk about rec centers. The rec centers on average, if you look at the country as a whole, from an operating cost perspective, need to be about 30% subsidized by cities. So if we have a rec center and it costs us $5 million a year to run it, that means the city would be required to put in a little over $1 million. Actually, $1.5 million to actually run that every year. What that doesn't include is any capital expenses associated with a rec center, for example. To build it, you would typically have to bond. That would be a capital expense. And then every 10 to 20 years, you need to do some kind of major renovations. Pools are particularly expensive to operate and maintain. There's replacements that happen on pumps and the filtering systems, and just the pool itself occasionally needs to be retrofitted. If you remember, if you've been here a few years, you'll remember that the cover that AF puts over their pool in the winter a few years ago was torn down during a severe windstorm. Now the insurance, I talked to the mayor there. The insurance actually covered the cost of replacing the tent that covers it, so that was good for them. But there are always significant maintenance costs that happen there. And then if you want to do another big capital improvement, you may end up bonding for that, and that it does not fall into the category of operating costs. So rec centers do cost money. They're not profit centers. There may be some outliers that are profitable, but generally they're not. They do cost the city money. So when I've heard it discussed in the past, some people say, well, let's put it in and it'll pay for itself. Well, actually they don't. And so the fact that people don't want to spend tax dollars for that means that unless there's a significant change in attitudes in the city, that won't be happening for a few years. Now, I happen to be among those that think that I'm happy to use AF, for example. I sign up and subscribe to the AF one. I know there are people in Highland that subscribe to Lehigh's. And where I grew up, our community pool was farther away from my home in my city than where American Forks pool is by a long shot. So for me, using AF isn't difficult. Now it does get mentioned occasionally that we should do something with Cedar Hills, Alpine, and Highland, do a community center or a rec center, sorry. Those are tricky to negotiate because cities have their own interests, and it's our interests aren't always aligned with Cedar Hills, and so those agreements are difficult to come by. They have different taxing strategies and policies that they implement based on their residents. Alpine and Highland, our demographics are very similar, and the thoughts are there. So anyway, I don't see a city-built rec center coming in the future, but that's my opinion. And councils change and residents change. So it could change in the future, but right now I just don't see that happening in any part of the near future. So let's go through as well some questions that I've already seen on the city survey. I've gotten access to the online survey results. And I've started going through the questions and writing responses to them there. So let me just walk through. We'll go back and get rid of this one. Let me go to my other spreadsheet where the questions are there. And I'll just scan through them, and I'll start at the top, and we'll respond to a couple of them. I notice that there are people watching right now. So if you have questions, go ahead and type into the chat your question, and I'll respond to it. But so the first question, or first comment, sorry, it's not a question, is allow full height fencing along the trails. Well, we currently do if the trail corridor is wider than 40 feet. If it's less than 40 feet, the fencing ordinance says that you can have a solid fence up to 4 feet high, and then the top 2 feet need to be open. So that can be a screen, or it can be bars, or a checkerboard, but they have to be open. And the reason that ordinance exists, is because the feeling is that if you put a full 6-foot fence on either side, you create a tunnel that might be unsafe. If you leave it open, you create an opportunity for people to be able to see what's happening on the trail, and that would help make the trail safer. I know there are different opinions on it. I don't live on a trail. I would fall into the camp of I want a solid fence because I don't want people looking in my backyard. But it was discussed at length a number of years ago, and a compromise was reached. The first policy was that your fence couldn't be higher than 4 feet. And then they changed it to you can have a solid fence for 4 feet, and then a screen at between 4 and 6 feet. So that's current policy. If you want to see that changed, I would talk with your council members and interact with them if you think that is something important and you want to encourage that to be reconsidered. It was debated quite heavily before. I imagine it would be debated again. All right, next comment is we need better restaurants. I do agree. Personally, I would love to have In-N-Out in Highland. I don't think that will ever happen because they tend to be along very busy intersections, typically relatively close to the freeway, and we are not. However, on the good news front, behind Blue Lemon and north of Taco Time is some vacant property, and the property owners approached us a few weeks ago, and in council we approved a building that will have, let me see if I can remember and describe it correctly, a shipping center. So this would be like a return center for Amazon or eBay purchases. You could have your online purchases delivered there for you to pick up. In that same area, there was space for a couple of other local businesses. And then in addition, they had 2 pads set up for drive-through restaurants. Now I know that the restaurants that some of us want are not drive-through, like an Olive Gardens or say Cafe Rio or something like that. But a lot of restaurateurs right now are just not interested in anything other than a restaurant that has a drive-through capacity because of what happened with COVID. So they were nervous about setting up a in-only dining restaurant. But that shipping center and the 2 restaurant pads are going to come up here and be under construction in the relative near future. And so we can expect to see a couple of other food choices. Another place that we'll see some additional food choices in the very near future is on North County Boulevard at Harvey, at the connection where Harvey Boulevard is. That's where the reception center is, and the place where you can, the garden, the Highland Gardens, I believe it's called. So right across from that is where the Canal Boulevard will be extended through to North County Boulevard. By the way, we have tentatively set up a date for the grand opening for that road of May 15th. We expect paving to start in April sometime, and we expect it to be finished by May 15th. So that is our tentative date for the grand opening for that road. Very exciting. But on the south side of that road, where it will connect with North County Boulevard, is a commercial section that Boyer is working on. And I talked to the Boyer project manager that oversees that area, and he said they already have a couple of restaurants looking to open there. And they're close to signing, but he couldn't tell me because they haven't officially signed up yet. But both are ones that we will. He said we will frequent, and one of them is kind of a sit-down oriented restaurant. So that should be an exciting news when that comes. So that's 4 new restaurants potentially coming online this year in Highland. So we will have some changes there. Next comment was it would be great to see several pickleball courts in Highland. It is not good or fair to have Alpine, American Fork, and Cedar Hills take responsibility when we have a large population who enjoy the sport. Agreed. We do have a large population there. Last time I did a rough estimate, I concluded that we had between 1,500 to 2,000 residents who regularly play pickleball, and that would be from all different age groups. So there are quite a few people that enjoy the sport. On the good news front there, we will be having a meeting shortly in the next council meeting, actually not the next one, but probably May 30th or the third Tuesday in April, where we'll bring up Mountain Ridge Park and get some final direction from council on how to proceed there. What we're looking at right now is putting in the parking lot on the north side of that. That's off of 10400, just west of Mountain Ridge Junior High. And we'll be putting a parking lot in. We'll be piping the ditch there. We'll put some landscaping, curb gutter, and sidewalk. And then we'll have a children's park. The intent is here in the center on the north side, just past the parking lot, to have an all abilities type of park. And then on the left side of that is space for 8 or more pickleball courts, but we'll start with 4. I personally believe that will be expanded to 8 and possibly more. But with the budget we have to work with, that's pretty much all that we can do right now. So there'll be a pavilion and some restrooms, but parks are surprisingly expensive to build. So we'll see when we get started on that. I would guess that could be started sometime this year in terms of prep work, and perhaps actually be completed early next year. I think we would get better bids if we bid later in the year for next year than bid this year for the end of this year. The contractors are extremely busy, and prices are skyrocketing in the construction world. Here's a resident, next one. I really don't want to get rid of the half-acre or larger zoning lots. I don't want to see any high-down city housing in Highland, and I don't want to lose any of the trails. Well, our minimum standard zone is R120. The default zone is R140. R120 lots are 20,000 square feet or larger lots, which is slightly under half an acre. R140, if you look at R140 subdivisions, the average lot size in those is almost 0.8 acres. I don't see that changing. I do know that The housing is going to be a little bit denser south of the high school. That was already approved. That's called a mixed zone. And we define those and work with the developer to facilitate putting in commercial and residential in areas. That's one that was identified in our general plan as a mixed use area suitable for higher density housing. Construction will start, like I mentioned, this year in that area. They'll start on the south side. The final plat approval for phase one includes 266 dwelling units. Part of those would be senior oriented housing. There's 80 of those planned. Then there are some townhomes planned and some lots on the west side that will overlook Highland Glen Park that are quarter acre size lots. These will actually be nice homes. Those homes there will be a little bit pricey. The townhomes, and they call them cottage homes. So they're smaller lot homes. Individual units will comprise the rest of the area. When it's all done, there'll be 699 residential units there. And Boyer is very, very anxious to start and get moving on that. And so I would guess over the next 2 to 3 years that phase one will be completed, and we'll probably, may have even started on phase two. They're just chomping at the bit to do those because of the demand that exists for houses. So that's where that is. I see another comment that says better snow removal on sidewalks around parks and along Alpine Highway. We do the best we can. Roads obviously have a priority. We do have a couple of side-by-side vehicles, the smaller recreational type vehicles that we fit with snowplows, and we have staff that does that, but we have, excluding the Murdoch Canal Trail, about 16, 17 miles of trail that we are responsible for, in addition to sidewalks on Alpine Highway, Timpanogos Highway, and North County Boulevard. So there's a lot of snow removal to be done. So we're just working as best we can, and I don't know that will get any quicker. Kind of depends on the snow year. Here's a comment. The roads are so poor, I voted to increase the tax, but still feel like I need a four-wheel drive to outlast the potholes. Well, I guess it depends where you're driving, because we are starting the fourth year of our 7-year plan. So we are a little, when we're done this year, we'll be a little over half done with our 7-year plan. We have made a lot of progress. Last year we worked on Highland Boulevard and 11800 and 9600 North. This year, you'll be glad to know, and this is the road that I think we get the most complaints on, that we will be widening the road and redoing the road, essentially taking it down to the dirt on 68,000 West. That's the road to Costco, from 9600 North south to past the Equestrian Center. So this is a multi-city project because it impacts Lehigh. The county owns property in the area, and that property is in the county. It's not just owned by the county, it's in the county. And then we own some. So that project in total, I think, is budgeted at about 2.2 million. We are wrapping up land acquisition activities related to fixing the road. And provided that gets done in a timely fashion, we'll actually be able to finish that this year. The property isn't fully acquired yet, so there's still a very small risk that it would get pushed into next year. But I think we're going to be able to do that this year. So hopefully that gets done. Probably 95% positive that'll happen. And I think that is the source of complaints. Another source of complaints is that will get fixed this year is the west side of Country Club. The entrance there is, in some areas, it's like it because there's so many potholes, it's almost a contiguous set of pothole repairs. So that road is going to be fixed just there at the entryway um, to the church. So that'll be completely redone, and that'll be a good thing. There are more roads to be done. Again, yes, there are some that aren't done, and there are some that are. So be patient. Like I said, this is the fourth year of a 7-year road plan. So we are where we expected to be roughly on the roads. There's a concern about open space tax. It's actually an open space fee being unfair. For those of you that don't know, there are 18 subdivisions in Highland that were developed under an open space overlay agreement, where in an R140 zone, a developer could get higher density in exchange for building local parks and putting in trails. At the time those were established, rather than do an HOA to fund that, the city made the choice of creating what's called a special service district, where we could have a fee put on those residents to cover the cost of maintaining the open space and trails in their area. So this is an issue I have looked into extensively, and here's what I have found. If you remove the trails and have the city fund the trail maintenance, if you take out of any open space neighborhood parks that are reservable, and there are a few, there's one in Wimbledon, there's Beacon Hills, has reservable fields there. If you take those spaces out and only are looking at the cost of maintaining essentially the neighborhood parks, it actually correlates to $20 a month, and it is a benefit. We recognize that those neighborhood parks do get used by people who don't live in open space neighborhoods. This is something I'm personally vested in, and I think a fair compromise would be to say, okay, let us take a percentage and say 20%, and say the city will cover 20% of the cost of maintaining the open space or the neighborhood parks. That would cut the fee down by a few bucks a month for the people residing in open space areas. And I think that would, or something like that, would be a fair way to mitigate that concern. Now, it's not going to make everybody happy. We did see a substantial increase in our sales tax revenue this year with COVID. Some of that is perhaps because more people are buying online because of COVID. And last year, something called the Wayfair ruling was put into effect. That is a ruling made about the company Wayfair that said that states have a right to collect sales tax on all internet sales. And so there were some policies put in place that were implemented last year to do that. So I think we got about a 20% bump last year from year to year over year in sales tax revenue. That's actually a little bit more than some of our neighboring cities. But we are getting more money, and some of that is permanent. And so I think we can take a portion of that, quote, permanent sales tax revenue increase and use that to fund the city subsidy for the neighborhood parks in open space areas. And again, I think that's fair. Some kind of a compromise in there a mix is a fair way to deal with that issue. Again, not everybody's going to be happy. It's not a perfect solution, but I think it's fair based on where we're at. So, still checking for questions. I don't see any. I don't have text messages. You can also text message me if you'd like. My number is 801-318-7141. If you want to text me a question if you're watching. So let's keep going down. Open space. Why is there a need for 3 police cars, officers at every routine traffic stop? We get this question occasionally. I've talked to our police chief about it. Occasionally we're training new officers, and so a second car is brought there so that someone in training can participate. Our cars generally only have one officer, and there are occasions when you stop people where there might be an issue besides just the traffic violation. So it's not a bad policy to have a second officer there. It's not a majority of their time. And again, I've gone through this with several times with the police chief and have come away satisfied that what's happening out there is justified, and it's really not an issue. You may still think it is, but it appears to me that while we see that occasionally, there are reasons for doing that make sense. Trust me, they're busy. They have, between Highland and Alpine, we cover about 30,000 people, and if you look at our police officer to population ratio, it's significantly lower than the normal ratio that's out there. And it's because we just, while we have crime, it's not as big an issue as it is somewhere else. And in fact, speaking of crime, this year, if you look at the most recent FBI statistics, Highland Alpine, I should say, because we share a police force, is again the safest cities in Utah for those with a population of 10,000 or more. We've been 1, 2, or 3 for the last 10 or more years. So Highland really is a good place to be. We actually score well if you look at both violent crime and then other crime, and if you look at cost of crime, I've got a set of spreadsheets I've set up that I update every year with data that covers that. In fact, if we have a second before we end, actually let's just do that right now. So open up a window, search for crime, and I'm bringing up a spreadsheet here. And if we just look at this year, that one is up at all. It takes a little bit to look. It's pretty it's a lot of data, because I take the FBI data for the whole country and then chop it together. So now I've got it up. Let me share it with the screen here. Let's do another screen share. Let's see, we'll look at that. And let me share that with you. So if we look at the first chart here, I hope everybody can see that. Let me know if you can't. It's violent crimes per 1,000 residents. So Highland is black, Utah is red, and the US is blue. You'll notice that Utah is significantly below the national average. And in Utah's case, we're actually trending up in that category. In the US's case, we're trending down. And then if you look at Highland, there is a long-term downward trend for that. And you can see the difference between our crime rate and Utah as a whole. So we do really, really well there. If you look at property crimes, and in this case, Highland, Alpine, we're in red. Utah is burgundy, and the US is blue. Utah and the US averages are not that far apart. Some years were better than the national average, some years were worse. Highland, Alpine is significantly better, and you can see there is also a downward trend there. The shaded line is the trend line. And now if we look at cost of crime per capita, and I used some data from a couple of studies that calculated the cost of crime based on the type of crime. And again, comparing us to Utah and the country as a whole, we are very, very low. If you look at the cost of violent, let's see, where's cost of crime per capita? So that's the cost of all crime per capita. If you look at combined crimes, so you put violent crimes and property crimes together, you can see that Utah is below the national average. Our downward trend in Utah is not as steep as the country as a whole, but it is declining, and we have a much better combined crime rating than Utah as well. So again, we are the safest in Utah, and you can see here the three general categories: violent crime, property crime, cost of crime. In 2019, we were the lowest in each category. In 2018, we were the lowest in property crime, and then second in cost of crime and violent crime. In 2017, we were fifth in property crime, but in combined crime or in violent crime and cost of crime, we were second. So you can see that we generally do really, really well. And if you take violent crime as the one you really care about, and look at that from 2010 to 2019, we were first or the lowest every year, except one year we were fourth, and then 3 years we were second, and 1 year we were third. So the majority of the time we were the lowest in the state for violent crime. And cost of crime kind of mirrors violent crime. So interesting data. Let's see if I can bring something else up that might be of interest. I do have a table, but I think it's in another spreadsheet. But that's anyway, that's generally really good news for Highland relative to crime. So let's get back to the questions. And again, let me just check, see any comments. Nope, no comments. So I assume that means I'm either addressing what your concerns are, or you've got the video up, but maybe you're watching something else, or reading a good book. Hopefully, if you're reading a good book, then that's a good use of time. So let's go back to the questions. So we just did the 3 officer issue. You're somebody that's very thankful for the trails that we have. And somebody else is very interested in pickleball courts. We discussed those. There will be at least 4 that get created in the near term. Somebody wants a rec center. We discussed that. Is there a reason why businesses in Highland are not allowed to stay open on Sunday? So there were a few questions on that score. There was somebody that responded 3 times with the exact same really lengthy comment on that. But this is something that there are 2 sides of this coin, right? So I fall in the camp that appreciates Sunday closing, and I would always lobby to keep that policy. We did vote on that back in 2012, I believe, and the residents voted to keep Sunday closing. A referendum was run at that time when the council voted 3-2 to go to a Sunday opening policy, and residents ran a referendum, got it on the ballot, and then the residents voted and and overturned the council decision. So what are the issues there? A couple of them. One is, and I researched that extensively, for those who believe that it's unconstitutional to do that, that is not true. It's gone before the Supreme Court 5 times and been upheld by a supermajority most of those times. Because it is not, it's viewed by the courts as a common day of rest established by an entity, and it's not something that is forcing religion on anybody. It's a community value, and they uphold those. Now, when you do, I did a lot of research, and there were studies that were done by one of them, I think, was MIT, and someone else that looked at the social impacts of going from Sunday close to Sunday opening. And they found that for those who were religious, that when that change was made, especially those that were religious, alcoholism went up in the areas, drug abuse increased, and there were a number of social ills that increased as a result of changing that policy. There was another study that was done about what is the impact on retail in a region when you go from Sunday closed to Sunday opening, and they found that within a region, if you go from Sunday closed to Sunday open, there is not a meaningful change in the retail activity. What they did find was that small businesses were hurt, and that customers migrated to bigger businesses for their shopping needs. So my conclusion, after all my research, was it's a constitutional decision that a county, city, or state can make. That the net effect was there is no net increase in retail activity. If you go to Sunday opening, it does shift business. So, and then there are negative social consequences to shifting from Sunday close to Sunday opening. Now that perhaps I can't to say with any definite support that one of the reasons that we are the lowest, or often the lowest crime rate cities in Utah, Highland and Alpine, could be because we are only two cities in Utah that have a Sunday closing policy. So I choose to believe that it does influence that statistic. Um, Others can choose not to. So I think there is a benefit on that front from Sunday closing. I think we do help small businesses. One of the better restaurants in Utah, one I particularly enjoy, got its start in Highland. That's the Blue Lemon. That was the first restaurant that they established, and now there are a number of other ones throughout the state. I don't know if they've gone out of state yet, but it's a restaurant I enjoy taking advantage of it occasionally. Really good food and reasonably priced. So anyway, I think that's great. Now, I did mention that there is property, commercial property north of, and I'm pointing this way because it's right out my office window, and that's the direction that the property is. But behind Blue Lemon and north of Taco Time and the Quick Quack Car Wash is about, I don't remember how many acres, I'm thinking 17-ish acres that are commercial property. And we talked about the shopping or the return center and the two restaurants. In addition, the developer there is talking with three grocery establishments and they're going to be putting in about a 43,000 square foot building, grocery store there. And there are three that are looking at coming there, two national and one Utah-based, that are interested or very interested in opening shop there. The developer assured us that they understood about Sunday closing. He was very upfront about that. And we have two chains that are national chains that are very interested in coming here. So I don't know that Sunday closing is as big an inhibitor as some believe. Just another point on that score. Let's say we get a roughly 45,000 square foot grocery store in Highland. According to national statistics, that would generate, national averages say that would generate about $14 million in sales a year. I can't remember how recent that statistic is. That might be from 2016. And I know some things that we might shop for at a grocery store even that we actually buy over the internet now. So that might be down a little bit, but let's assume it's that. Then Highland's direct benefit from having that store there in terms of tax revenue would be in the neighborhood of $70,000 a year over what we're getting now. Now, currently our general fund budget is $10 million, and our utilities budget is combined. Those are called enterprise funds. So that's sewer, water, storm sewer, and then pressurized irrigation. We have a total budget there of about $10 million. In terms of comparing it to the budget as a whole, it isn't that much money, but it makes a difference. But it's just not as big a difference, I think, as people think. So, yes, we are interested in, and this is, I'll just say it from my point of view. I am interested personally in having businesses in the Highland that address our residents' needs. Ones that we would frequent. So like I love the Ace Hardware here. It saves us from going down to Home Depot or Lowe's to get parts that our local store provides for us. I like grocery stores, clearly. I like having the Quick Quack here. I really hated the name at first, but I actually use it quite a bit. So, and my wife uses it, and she was very much opposed to having Quick Quack here, but now she appreciates it as well. So stores that meet our needs. The biggest money maker for cities with respect to businesses are car dealerships. They're very expensive products, and they do generate sales tax. So car dealerships typically, especially the major brand new car dealerships, are located near freeways. And so, regardless of any other policy, Highland is not going to be a mecca for car dealerships. So we're going to lose revenue to other cities because we don't have car dealerships, but we're just not physically in the right place to do that. Another thing that hurts us, if you want to say hurt is the right word, relative to economic development, is the low density that we have in Highland. I like the kind of more quiet feel to Highland, even though, yes, traffic is increasing, and North County Boulevard, Timpanogos Highway, and Alpine Highway can get busy. But in relative terms, we are not Provo, we are not Orem, we're not Salt Lake City. We don't have a state street with billboards everywhere and wall-to-wall businesses. And while businesses do bring money, they also have a negative impact on your infrastructure. The trucks driving down the road that supply the retail stores have an inordinate amount of impact on roads. I reviewed this a few years ago, so you'll have to trust me that this may or may not be, don't trust me, but this may or may not be entirely accurate. But if I'm recalling correctly, a fully loaded semi has 20,000 times the impact on a road that a sedan does when it drives down the road. So one pass with a fully loaded semi is equivalent of 20,000 trips by a sedan. And just as how many is 20,000? Well, the traffic along Timpanogos Highway between Highland Boulevard and North County Boulevard ranges between 20 to 25,000 trips a day. So that's a lot of cars, and one fully loaded semi has the impact of all those cars if they were all sedans in one day. Still don't see any comments. I haven't gotten any texts, and we actually have 5 people watching now. If you're joining us late, this will be stored on my channel, and you can rewatch or watch the part that you missed. I know it's really exciting, and it keeps people up at night because they're so interested in learning about the city and the issues that we face. So let me see in the couple minutes that we have if there are any other questions that are novel. We need a rec center. This question is related to the decision the council made at the end of 2019 to sell about 1.2 miles of trails on over 5 acres of land in the Wimbledon subdivision, or to dispose of them, of the 1.2 miles of trail, and then sell the land adjacent to those trails, which ended up being over 5 acres of land, to the residents in the neighborhood. So their comment is, it is unfair and inappropriate for the current council to continue to undermine that decision. Rather than defending the city's prior decision, the city already supported the ballot initiative and now appears to be contemplating rescinding the prior vote. This seems improper, unethical, and unfair. The city should stay out of the issue and allow it to go to a vote in November. Well, the city had an obligation to support the referendum because that represented, it's a right that residents have. The information that was distributed and the form that was produced for the referendum was neutral, and it followed city guidelines. And then with respect to a council rescinding a prior council's decision, that happens almost every meeting. Every other meeting, the council change an ordinance or update an ordinance, and that in effect is changing the action of a prior council. Um, changing the prior decisions is normal. It's allowed. It happens all the time. So why would the council, and I don't have a say in this vote, why would the council overturn that decision without having it go to a vote? Well, they could overturn it because I think everyone is confident that when it comes to a vote, that the trails, because of the popularity of trails in Highland, that getting rid of 1.2 miles of trail will not be supported at the ballot. So there will be a cost associated with going to the ballot for the city. There's a mailer that we have to put together and send to everybody. There's a time that we'll spend talking to residents who ask us about the issue, staff and elected officials. And it was a very divisive issue at the time. And it actually split neighborhoods. They were, residents were, I'll say this is my opinion, they were kind of in a state of war with each other. It was really a really unhealthy environment for the neighborhoods involved in this decision and prior ones that involved trying to decide whether or not a trail would be eliminated. So the council could say, when we are almost certain of the outcome, why would we incur additional costs that all the residents will come out of their pocketbooks, and why would we foster division within the community when it was a council decision that was made before, and we regularly overturn prior council's decisions. This is one where the residents, or many residents, are not interested in selling it. So let's just make that decision. Let us be the bad guys and move on. And then there are the other perspective is to say, well, it would be useful to have that go to a vote so we can definitively say one way or the other what residents in general would like to do. So there are two sides to that coin. I can argue either point, but would not be unfair, improper, or unethical to overturn that decision if the council so chooses. It is up to them. And again, I can argue either side of that coin. And that's all I'll say. So it is a decision that the council could make if they wanted to, and it would be fair for them to do it, just as well as it would be fair for them to let it go to a vote. When referendums are run, it is not unusual for cities to just go ahead and make the change that the referendum asked for without having it go to a vote. That does happen, and it is not uncommon. I don't know that it's most of the time, but I do know that it happens. And so it's definitely not, it would not be a bad thing. It might not be a good thing, but it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Here's a thank you for mowing the open space around Wimbledon Trail twice last year. It made a huge difference. We have more money now than we did before with respect to us being able to apply those funds to trails. And so we're trying to use those funds effectively. Last year, we made a focused effort to do upkeep around the trails better than we had in the past. That will continue. It wasn't a one-year effort. It will continue. And we did it throughout the city. So it wasn't just the Wimbledon area. We did actually resurface over half the trails in Highland. The other, let's say 40%, they need more work than simply putting a surface coat on wood and tail. And we implemented or passed a 5-year plan this year to fix the other parts of the trails that need more than just a seal coat. And so over the next 5 years, we'll update all our trails so that they'll be in great shape going forward. So we are making improvements. I know there were people that weren't confident that we would, but we are. Oops, you know what? I just checked. We are 5 minutes over, so I apologize for running a few minutes over the hour that was scheduled. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to tell your friends and neighbors about Meet with the Mayor. We have this the second Wednesday of every month, and it's meant to be an open forum to ask me any questions, but I always come prepared with something to talk about. Pre-COVID, we would hold these in the library or in City Hall if we had a big crowd. I don't know if we'll do that in the future. It is nice to have this recorded and available for observing after the fact. So, maybe we'll do both, record it and have in person, then just have a camera there recording. That's just an extra expense. So we'll see how that goes. I do plan on next month, starting for the next few months, having a member of staff join me for our Meet with the Mayor, and we're looking at having the city engineer join us, our city finance director. I've even chuckled at the idea of inviting one of the administrative people who answer phones join us and ask them about the most interesting calls they've received. We do get the interesting ones occasionally. My office here is right next to one of the people that answers phones, and I get to hear half of the conversation sometimes, and they are interesting. I'll just put it that way. But by and large, and actually it's better than by and large, our residents are great people that try to do the right thing and are a pleasure to work with. So thank you for being you. I appreciate serving as mayor. It really is an enjoyable position for me. So thank you for helping make that enjoyable, and have a great evening. We will talk to you next month. And meanwhile, feel free to call me, or an email or text. Email is mayor@highlandcity.org. My mobile phone number is 801-318-7141. So call me or leave a text. I really answer my phones, and I don't get that many calls from people I don't know. So please don't hesitate, if you don't know me, to call me, because you're not going to be abusing that in any way. So have a wonderful evening. Talk to you next month.